Welcome to this short video. Today we're going to discuss a little bit of DLP, or data loss prevention. And in any environment, we start growing our environment with our various file servers. We have our databases. We're going to have our various applications that send communication, web servers, file access shares, and of course information in the cloud. And it becomes more and more difficult to look at DLP. When we talk about DLP, we're usually looking at three main areas. That's going to be endpoint protection, data in motion, or data in flight, and of course, data at rest. So let's take a look at how this works in a DLP solution. Data protection, of course, is usually agent-based. This is on your devices, your user devices, where we try to lock down those devices. That could include encryption of the hard drive or removable media, optical drive and USB port blocking, so people can't plug in USB devices to copy data, and even adding malware prevention to these. That usually is a broad scope of endpoint protection. Of course, we also have to look at the data in motion. That's the data that's moving across your wire, and then start inspecting some of that. Usually when we talk data in motion in DLP, this is around email and web-based. We have to filter this data on the local network, looking for sensitive information that probably shouldn't leave our network perimeter, and if it does, based on policy, to ensure that it's using encrypted channels to do so when it is allowed to. Data at rest, much easier in a database world, but data at rest on your file servers, SharePoint, we have to do this from a server standpoint, whether it's on premise or in the cloud. We have to look and identify where sensitive data may exist in our ever-growing network, and we have to define actions and policies to ensure we take proper access control with this. And if we notice, this can start becoming a fairly busy picture with a lot of moving parts in your environment, but DLP can work. At this point, we have to ask ourselves, well, what's missing? It's a very good question, because DLP is extremely good at locking down your devices and finding the data or sensitive data, but what's missing is the users themselves, who's getting this data or requesting access, and how was their access granted. This is usually a function or a gap in most DLP solutions. So most organizations will turn to identity access management and try to take that question away. By identifying what our users are, what their job roles are, and identifying them, we can take that question mark away. Now we understand exactly who the person is, what their job function is, and we can then grant them access, usually denoted by giving them a key or access privileges to a said resource. Identity access management usually comes with various workflows, entitlement reporting, identifying application owners, and even in some cases can supply a single sign-on to link various dispersed applications together, making it easier for users to do their work while still identifying and tracking them. However, this also can lead to some issues as an organization grows, where you start getting more and more keys to the kingdom. Perfect example is a user that's been in an organization over time usually will get more groups, more keys, more access permissions, and this can lead into a management nightmare as far as understanding exactly what they have access to. We'll get into that a little bit more shortly. But when we look at endpoint protection, we can kind of look at the different stages and how this might work. So again, as we talked about DLP as far as endpoint protection, we're usually talking about the user devices, the laptops and desktops. This is mostly a client-based solution. And again, common issues would be to lock down the USB port. So simply we deny access to the USB port, not allowing people to copy data off. To go a step further, many users will require the capability of plugging removable media in, most notably IT, and of course our executive staff. In those cases, we can allow the USB connection, but the agent can get a little more sophisticated and start looking at the type of data we're trying to copy off, and based on policy, deny those actions from actually occurring. From a data in motion, once we know the identity, we have access granted by our users, we have to start looking at how they're using data in motion and monitor this. So in this example, we're going to use an email, which is the most common way of sending data around. And in this case, it usually involves some type of gateway, a filter, or so forth, a WAF or an email filter. In this example, again, we're going to use email. So as the email is being sent, we can look inside the email and look for sensitive information. In this example, credit cards. That may be against policy. In this case, we could obviously deny that email from being sent altogether. Or another example would be we could remove the private information and allow the email to go through, both identifying back to the sender that the sensitive information was stripped out and denying that information to the receiver. As your environment grows, as we talked about, we can identify our users, we can start granting them access. But of course, in any environment, this will grow. More and more users, more and more groups, and of course, more and more access to that unstructured data. The other problem we always notice is people start using templates when they create users, granting them access to things maybe they shouldn't have. And this only gets worse in our unstructured data, and it gets difficult to manage. And again, we come back to that question mark. We identified our users, we started giving them keys, but then it's difficult to map up how many keys we've given to people, how many keys we've given to groups and nested groups, and what exactly do they have access to. This could happen in any organization that simply grows quickly or through acquisitions, making this, again, a management problem for IT. What we have to do is mostly this comes out in our unstructured data side of the house when we're talking about file servers, SharePoint, and things of that nature. It's not necessarily a failing of the DLP tool. It's just that things such as file sharing, that unstructured data, was not intended or was not created for fine user access. It's usually granted by directory structure, user share, or groups of users. So we have to look at an alternative that can help us in our DLP struggle. Because simply, again, granting so many keys out there to various resources, again, gives us a question mark of exactly what does it mean and what users have access to what data. And in this case, we have to look at tools that can help us look for sensitive data, look at where that is, who has access to it, and add on top of that analytics or user behavior analytics to find what users normally do and alert us when something is outside of the norm. So in summary, as we stated, a DLP is a multi-step solution where we have protection on the endpoint, we have to look at data in motion, and of course we even have to look at data at rest. We have to do this on-premise and in the cloud. Some solutions, not all of them, but a few solutions that can help us is Siren Web Security, Mimecast, Trend Micro, and Symantec. Not discussed so far, but in most healthy organizations, if you do have a SIM and you have some of these solutions, you should certainly be sending these events into your security event management system. Great examples are IBM's QRadar, Splunk, and Alert Logic. Whether your organization has an on-premise SIM, managed or unmanaged, make sure this critical information is being sent to your SIM and correlated. And lastly, as we had mentioned, especially when we get to the unstructured data, you may need additional help to filter exactly what the net result of these various groups and resources are. And in those cases, two of the leading tools are Varonis and StealthBits, which can help us identify where our data exists so we can apply DLP rules to them. And of course, who has access to these tools as we start getting user and key sprawl. So again, from Champion, thank you for watching.